So yesterday I left off magic and healing powers. It may help a little towards the comprehension of these differences of types if I give one or two examples of the methods likely to be employed, judging from the table that I have printed above, by persons on a different ray when they want to use magic to produce a given result. The first ray man would attain his object by sheer force of resistless will. So you will keep doing it until you manifest. That's what the hubcap master always did. He would just do it until he manifested. And without condescending to employ anything in nature of a means at all. And then the second ray would also work by force of will. So you will force anything you want to manifest. You don't care how you get it, you just will get it. But with full comprehension of the various possible methods and conscious direction of his will into the channel of the most suitable one. So they will find a way to generate the energy. And this is where a lot of people use Reiki. And they go around people with a lot of energy and they just keep raking till they suck the energy down in a person. Then they manifest everything they want. To the third ray man, it would come most naturally to use the forces of the mental plane. So there are people who are into sorcery and black magic that know how to use their mind to create command and get anything they want. Noticing very carefully the exact time when the influences were most favorable to the success. So they know when a lot of witches, a lot of warlocks, they use full moon ceremonies, they use a lot of things to create and manifest. And that's where they're using the mental plane. The fourth ray man would employ for the same purpose a finer physical force of the ethers. So where I ask permission, I let the universe know what I need, and they help me to manifest. I don't pretend to be Harry Potter. I don't pretend to be all kinds of things. And that's when you're starting to work with creator, angels, higher beings. You're asking. They know you need it. They know what it is. They know where to get it. I don't do spells. I don't conjure up things. I don't play those childish games. While his fifth ray brother would be more likely to set in motion a current of what's used to be called the astral light. So some people know how to generate light and understand how to create and manifest with that. The devotee of the sixth ray would achieve his result by strength of his earnest faith in his particular deity and in the efficiency of prayers to him. So you understand there are divine beings that work with you. And they will help you to manifest and create. That's where I say I ask the spirit world things and they bring it into my life. Smokies, Fox, doesn't matter. Fox name is all over the world. It's not just your culture. And I am here teaching and expressing, and if you don't like it, there's lots of sites you can go to. I'm not asking you to sit here. Like I say, natives all over the world. There's even Europeans with the last name Fox. It's not yours. It's not your culture. You don't own it. It's just a word. And you don't know where I got that from, so I don't have to explain anything. People are coming here to hear me teach and read, and if that's not what you want, like I say, go some other site. There's lots of places you can go to. Have a wonderful day. The devotee of the sixth ray would achieve his results by the strength of his earnest faith in his particular deity, in the efficiency of his prayer to him, while the seventh ray man would use elaborate ceremonial magic and probably invoke and assist of non-human spirits if possible. Again, in attempting to cure of a disease, the first ray would simply draw health and strength from the great fountain of universal light. The second would thoroughly comprehend the nature of the melody and know precisely how to exercise his willpower upon it to the best advantage. The third would invoke the great planetary spirit and choose a moment when astrological influences were beneficial for the application of his remedy. The fourth would trust chiefly his physical means, such as a message. The fifth would employ drugs. The sixth, faith healing. The seventh, mantras or magical invocations. In all above cases, the operator is of course free to use any of the different power methods, but would probably find the most effective instrument in his hands to be that which is typical of his own ray. And that's why you need to understand which ray you have. And this is where this knowledge is universal. The whole world knew this one time. All tribes of people understood this truth. It doesn't matter what culture or race. So the Chohans of the ray. In the members of the Adept Brotherhood, and the distinction of rays are much more clearly marked than in others, and are visible in the aura. The ray to which an adept belongs decidedly affects not only his appearance, but also the work that he has to do. We may perhaps best see what are the distinctive characters of the ray by observing the work of the fifth Chohan, or the ray of the third to seventh, and of the two Chohans who stand at their level, and the first and the second ray, and carry on work of the same grade in the service of the greater ones who are their directing heads. In the seven heads of the ray, in the hierarchy, we have a reflection of the seven spirits before the throne. It must be understood that we can here mention but the merest outline of the qualities that are grouped under each of the rays, but a fragment of the work that the adept on those rays are doing. And more must be taken also to realize that full possession of the qualities of one ray in one case implies the lack of those of the other rays. If we speak of one of the adepts, our preeminent in strength example, it is also true that he has achieved nothing less than human perfection in devotion and love to every other quality as well. Of the Master Moray, who is the representative of the first ray at the level of the Chohan initiation, I have already written to some extent. He stands with an unshakable and serene strength of his ray, playing a great part in that work of guiding men and forming nations, of which I must speak more fully in the next chapter. On that ray, too, there is a master whom we have called Jupiter, acting as guardian of India for the hierarchy, guardian of the nation, which throughout the long lifetimes of the fifth race cherishes the seeds of all its possibilities and sends them out in due course to each subrace, that they may grow and ripen and fructify. He also penetrates deeply into the abstruser sciences, abstruser sciences, of which chemistry and astronomy are the outer shells. His work in this respect is an example of the variety of activities that may exist within the limits of one ray. The Master Cthulhu was formerly the great teacher Pythagoras, is also a Chohan. He represents the second ray at the same level. This is the ray of wisdom, which gives great teachers to the world, and the work that lies upon it can best be described in connection with the Bodhisattvas and the Buddha in my next chapter. I have already spoken of the marvelous love and wisdom that radiates from the masters, whom I have inexpressibly delight, and honor to serve and follow. And all that I have said about the teachings and trainings of pupils expresses especially his method. Other teachers on other rays bring their pupils to the same point and develop in them exactly the same noble qualities, and always be the most irreproachable means, yet there are distinct differences in their methods. Indeed, there are varieties in a way in which the same master deals with different pupils. The book is right there, The Master and the Path. We say this over and over. You can read it. It tells you I'm reading this book. It is Charles W. Leadbeater. It's his knowledge. And he brought this book out in 1912 or something. At the head of the third ray stands a great master called the Venetian Chohan. In the men of that ray engaged in the service of a man that appear very strongly in characteristics of adaptability that belong to the ray, and its influence tends to make them fit themselves to people, so as to help them the better, and thus become, as St. Paul said, all things to all men. And that's where you're a real hollow bone when you're that. Those who are advanced in this ray have great tact and a rare faculty for doing the right thing at the right moment. Astrology is connected with this ray because, so far as an outsider may understand, the science of it is to know exactly when is the best time to do anything, to set any given force in motion, and to know also when the present time is not a fitting one to do a certain thing. That's where everything fits in at the right time. All things, even healing, everything. Everything has a place and time, and there's always a time, and some things may take years, and then one day, bam, it's just gone. And that's where me and Cindy incorporate astrology. We incorporate all kinds of knowledge in the things we do. Astrology is connected with this ray, and because so far it is the outsider may understand the science of it, is to know exactly when is the best time to do anything. And that's where even farmers, they know the moons, when to plant at the right time. All over the world, people know that. To set any given force in motion, and to know also when to present time, when the present time is not a fitting one to do certain things. And in that way, save ourselves a great deal of trouble and make ourselves more useful. The fourth ray is under the care of the master Serapis. In the early days of Theosophic society, he used to hear a good deal about him, because of the fact that he, at one period, took charge of the training of Conal O'Cott. Such interchange of pupil among the masters of the special and temporary purpose is not infrequent. The particularly line of this Chohan is harmony and beauty, and the people who belong to his type are always unhappy until they can introduce harmony into their environment. So you might have found somebody who was born and they were never happy. And they're in this energy, they're this chakra ray. Yes, Denny Jackson, you're getting it. So the master moray, okay, I'm going to go back. The fourth ray is under the care of Master Serapis. In the early days of Theosophic society, we used to hear a good deal about him, and because of the fact that he at one period took charge of the training of Conal O'Cott, when his own master, the Master Moray, was otherwise engaged for a time. Such interchange of pupils among the masters for special and temporary purpose is not infrequent. The particular line of this Chohan is harmony and beauty, and people who belong to this type are always unhappy until they can introduce harmony into their environment. For it is along that line that they do most of their work. Art counts for much on this ray, and many artists belong to this. And that's where some people are born as children and they're just never happy. There's nothing wrong with them. And a lot of them are artists. A lot of them are all kinds of things. But they can never find happiness. They can never understand things. And no matter what you do, they just seem to be miserable. And they have to do art. And they have to figure out how to bring beauty, harmony, and things into their environment. When they bring in negative things to fight, it just keeps them stuck. And they got to start seeing and understanding that they got to bring this. As they do it, it's going to start changing them. But they have to really go deep in. That's where some people are meant to do art. Because I know some people, when they do art, they channel energy from the universe into that art. And if you put it in your home, it's going to change everything. And I know people who also do art that put black magic and negative things that if you had it in your home, it would do the reverse. As the head of the fifth ray stands the Master Hilarion with his splendid qualities of science accuracy. He was once umbilicus of the of the Neoplatonic school. So he probably brought in all those crystals that people know, the Platonics. And he gave us, through MC, Light on the Path, so that's a book, and the Iliad of the White Lotus. He being, as our president puts it, a skilled craftsman in poetic English prose and in melodious utterances. So he probably did a lot of poetry, probably sang and did all kinds of stuff. His influence is upon most of the great scientists of the world. So if you're a scientist, this is who you work with. You have to understand this. You got to understand your rays. You got to stop playing games. You got to figure this out. In natives, we know the four colors and we try to work with them. Everybody has that. The Chinese know this. The Tibetans know this. There's a lot of cultures out there that use astrology and that know this. And they use it to have happy lives, even where their house face, what numbers, what streets, everything, they know this. So no matter what, they're always happy. Okay, science, where was that? Okay, science investigation is concerned. The master science, okay, I gotta go back here. So, he being the president put its skilled craftsmen in poetic English prose and melodious utterances. His influences upon most of the great scientists of the world, so even Einstein and them were working with this master. The people well advanced along his ray are notable for their ability to make accurate observations and be absolutely dependable where scientific investigation is concerned. So, Miranda, if you're there, your husband can tune into this. The master science extends, of course, far beyond what is commonly called by name, and he knows the works with many of the forces which nature introduces into the life of man. Nature is responsive to the moods of mankind and intensifies them in various ways. If a man is happy and joyous, other creatures enjoy his presence. The nature spirits go forth to meet him, and his own happiness is thus increased. This sort of resurrection takes place everywhere. In the north of Europe, for example, the nature spirits are somewhat wistful and have moods of mournful introspections. And such as these find a ready home in Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Britain, and similar places. They respond less readily to joy, and the people there are also colder and more difficult to rouse. So they know about the fairies, they know about these beings that are trying to help. In those countries, nature is less joyous. They are all lands of much rain and dull skies, gray and green, where life and poetry take a wistful turn. The contrast is tremendous between those of Greek or Sicily, where everything is radiant, gold and blue and red, and all the people are joyous and happy on the surface. The creatures of nature actually bathe in the person's happiness, and most of all, they are drawn to anyone who is full of joyous love. They are happy in the aura and regard him with high favor. Today, much of this side of life is ignored. Though our knowledge of the physical plane is wide and detailed, we know, for example, that water equals H2O. The ancient Hindus and the ancient Greeks may or may not have been aware of that, but at any rate, they recognize the presence of the different types of nature spirits connected with the water and utilize their services as definitely as we today use the power of electricity and the expansion of steam to drive many forms of machinery. And that's where they got the god Neptune and all kinds of other gods of the water world and their legends and their stories. The Master Jesus, who became an adept in his incarnation as Apollonius of Tyana, Tyana, and was afterwards the great South Indian religious reformer Sri Ramanujakarya, so Ramanujacarya. So Jesus was that being also in India. Ruled the sixth race, that of bhakti or devotion. This is the ray of the devotion saints and mystics of every religion. So there's a lot of people who are mystics and things like that. They're a part of this sixth ray. And they don't play games. They don't try to fool anybody. They don't use things wrong. This is the ray of devotional saints, mystics of every religion. The Chohan Jesus was charged of such people under whatever forms they may worship the divine being. And that's where you gotta really decide to accept the Creator and the light. No more looking for the darkness and Satan and bullshit and wasting life and time. This is the ray of devotional saints, mystics of every religion. The Chohan Jesus has charge of such people under whatever forms they may worship the divine being. 1900 years ago, Apollonius of Tyana was sent out by the Brotherhood upon a mission, one feature of which was that he was to found in various countries certain magnetic centers, and they're power points. Objects of nature, of talismans, were given to him, which he was to bury at these chosen spots in order that the forces which they radiate might prepare these places to be the centers of great events in future. And this is where these Shangri-Las and these energies and all kinds of things are there. They will activate. People will go to these places and they'll be protected, like it said in the Keys of Enoch and other books that I've read. And these places are real. Some of these centers have already been utilized, but some have not, and all these latter are to be employed in the immediate future in connection with the work of the coming Christ, so that much of the detail of his work was already definitely planned nearly 2,000 years ago. The agreement even on the physical planes were being made to prepare for it. And there are people who've been working throughout life over 2,000 years trying to get prepared to do this, and they will be in the future. The head of the seventh ray is the master of the conveyed Germain, known to history in the 18th century, so Saint Germain, whom we sometimes call the Master Rakoczy, Rakoczy, as he is the last survivor of the royal house. He is Francis Bacon, Lord Verulam, Verulam, in the 7th century, Robertus, the monk in the 1600s, Hyundai Janus in the 5th, Christian Rosencreuz in the 14th, Roger Bacon in the 13th. He is the Hungarian adept of the occult world. Further back in time, he was the great Neoplatonus Perculus, and before that, Saint Albane. So these masters came in as lots of different people to help change and do things for this world. That's why if they're teaching you, listen to them. He works to a large extent through ceremonial magic and employs the service of great angels who obey him implicitly and rejoice to do his will. Though he speaks all European and many Oriental languages, much of his work is in Latin, the language which is a special vehicle for his thought, and the splendor and rhythm of it is unsurpassed by anything we know down here. In his various rituals, he wears wonderful and many-colored robes and jewels. He has a suit of gold chainmail, which once belonged to the Roman emperor. Over it is thrown a magnificent cloak of crimson, with on its clasps a 7-pointed star, a diamond, amethyst, and sometimes he wears a glorious robe of violet. Though he is thus engaged with ceremonials and still works some of the rituals of the ancient mysteries, even the names which have long been forgotten in the outer world, he is also much concerned with the political situations in Europe and the growth of modern physical science. So this next one is qualities to be developed. So people have to develop qualities. To have these masters and teachers, you have to do this. You can't just sit there and fart all day and expect to turn into a fairy princess. The qualities to be developed. The following is a summary of the characteristics of these Chohans and their ray as I have given them to the science of the sacraments, with a thought to be held in mind by those who wish to serve along their respective lines. Number 1, strength. I will be strong, brave, persevere in his service. So you will get put through all kinds of hardships. It's not, oh, poor me, I have such a bad life. It's not that. You're put there for a reason. Number 2, wisdom. I will attain that intuitional wisdom which can be developed only through perfect love. So that's wisdom. Number 3, adaptability or tact. I will try to gain the power of saying and doing just the right thing at the right moment, of meeting each man on his own ground in order to help him more efficiently. And this is where I get put in places to help people. Number 4, beauty and harmony. So far as I can, I will bring beauty and harmony into my life and surroundings that they may be more worthy of him. I will learn to see beauty in all nature, that so I may serve it better. And that's recognizing the Creator and the higher beings, right? No problem, Smokey. I'm glad you're here. I hope you really learn. There's lots to know when I share that knowledge. You don't have to apologize. Everything happens for a reason. Science is detailed knowledge. I will gain knowledge and accuracy that I may devote them to his work. Then the next one is devotion. I will unfold within myself a mighty power of devotion that through it I may bring others to him. This is where you decide to become a teacher. You don't hide at home. You don't hide at work. You don't try to hide out in nature. You don't try to find a cave or crawl into the earth. You go, okay, God, where do I need to be? Oh, I need to go into a city. I need to live on Skid Row in some of the craziest things. Well, put me there. I'll be a divine being. I'll be a hollow bone. I'll do whatever I can to help people. The order of service, number 7. I will so order and arrange my service to God along the lines which he has prescribed, that I may be able to fully take advantage of the loving help which his holy angels are always waiting to render. All these different qualities will have to be developed in each one of us in due time, but we shall possess them all perfectly only when we ourselves have reached perfection and become supermen. And that's where stop being angels. Stop doing the namaste and all these things and hugging people heart to heart and all this stuff. Quit it. Learn how to do right. All these difficult qualities will have to be developed in each one of us in due time, but we shall possess them all perfectly only when we ourselves have reached perfection and become supermen. At the present time, one of the ways in which our imperfection shows itself in our lives is in the fact that we have some one characteristic developed in excess of others. So you'll see somebody have something. And a lot of people see me as negative because they want to manifest me that way. So I'll show up, whatever they believe, I become it. And then they judge and condemn me. And I'm like, God allows me to do all of this to try to teach people things. I don't worry about it. Never have. At the present time, one of the ways in which our imperfection shows itself in our lives is the fact that we have some one characteristic developed in excess of others. There are some, for example, who have scientific accuracy and discrimination well unfolded within them, but because as yet they have not cultivated affection and devotion, their nature is cold and hard. A lot of scientists, a lot of biologists are that way. They have no love. They just want to make these things happen. Like I said, I knew a guy who worked in the science labs in the University of Alberta, and he was taking crystals and that, and he was charging them up. And I'm like, you could blow up the whole world like they did in Atlantis times. And so this is where it's like there are some people, and he has a lot of knowledge about energy, he has a lot of knowledge about spiritual things and that. And he says, you are on this side over here, I'm on this side. And I told him, I know that. And I just allow him to be. I don't try to tell him he's right or wrong. And he is a scientist, and he knows all kinds of things. But he walks his journey, I walk my journey. Within them, but because as yet they have not cultivated affection and devotion, their nature is cold and hard. They often appear unsympathetic and are liable to misjudging their fellow men. In matters of judgment or in the consideration of all intellectual problems, their attitude is often intensely critical. And I know a lot of people like that are critical. Their decisions would always tend to be against rather than in favor of any person who happens to cross their path, whereas the devotion of affection types of people would make far more allowances for the other man's point of view, and would on the whole be more likely to judge favorably, and even if their judgment were wrong, as they might easily be swayed by their feelings, it would err on the side of mercy. Both these are defections from strictly accurate judgment, and in ourselves, it will be necessary in the course of time to balance these qualities perfectly. For the Superman is the perfectly balanced man, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, as it says in this. Equilibrium is called yoga. That's all your chakras. Everything's in balance. There's nothing out. And that's where you're working and serving the universe. You're not pretending to be a yoga or yogi or a master, anything. You really are that being. So these books and these things that I read and try to share are really important. Because say there's masters, they know if you're honest or not. If they're going to teach you, you have to understand. And you can't pretend to be something you're not. None of it works that way. You're attracted to certain people and certain things because you're on that ray. And there's a book there that explains the rays, like even with Bill Clinton, with different people on the planet, like Oprah on that, and what is their dominant ray and what is their weak ray. And there are different ones. And we're always working on the 7 rays. And every day of the week, you're supposed to try to align with all of that. So this is the book, The Circle of Initiates, Past and Present. So you even see Einstein is in there, even as Elvis Presley, Leonardo da Vinci, Barack Obama, John Paul II, Walt Disney. And it tells you their energy. Even Bill Gates is in here, Donald Trump. So if you want to understand the rays, everybody is here for a reason. Yeah, Churchill. That's it, the guy from England right there. Thanks, Danny. So, like I say, there's so many books out there that have knowledge and truth. Are you going to use it right, or are you going to pretend to be a master and sell it to somebody? I'm sharing it because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the whole world. And I'm putting the books and the authors and all this stuff out there for people to resource and use, because throughout time we have taken things and altered and changed it, and different people brought it in because the universe want that for a reason. Yes, Lincoln, man. So I'll go back into reading before time gets too far away. So the next, the cycles of changes. Cyclical changes. In the 7 planetary logi, certain cyclical changes periodically occur, which corresponds correspond perhaps to in-breathing and out-breathing, or to the beating of the heart down here on the physical plane. However that may be, there seems to be an infinite number of possible permutations and combinations of them. And since our astral bodies are built of very matter of their astral bodies, it is obvious that no one of these planetary logi can change astrally in any way without thereby affecting the astral body of every man in the world. Though, of course, more especially those in whom there is a preponderance of matter expressing him. If it be remembered that we take the astral plane merely as an example, and that exactly the same thing is true on all the other planes, we shall then begin to have some idea of the importance to us of the emotions and the thoughts of these planetary spirits. Whatever these may be, they are invisible in their long history of human race as regular cyclical changes in the temperament of the people and the consequent characters of their civilizations. Putting aside the thought of the world period and considering only the period of a single root race, we find that in the 7 rays are preponderant in turn perhaps more than once. But in the period of the dominance of each ray, there will be 7 sub-cycles of influence, according to a rather curious rule which requires some explanation. Let us take, for example, the period in history, the race when the 5th ray is dominant. During the whole of that epoch, the central idea of that ray, and probably a religion founded upon it, will be prominent in the minds of men. But that time is predominance will be subdivided into 7 periods, in the first of which this idea, though still principal one, will be colored by the idea of the first ray. The method of the first ray will be the same extent combined with its own. In the second of its subdivision, its idea and method will be similarly colored by those of the second ray, and so on, so that in its 5th subdivision, it will naturally be at its purest and strongest. It would seem as if these divisions and subdivisions ought to correspond with subraces and branch races respectively, but it has not so far been possible for us to see that they do so. And this is where you got to live for a long time. You got to live like 1,000,000 years to be able to look back and see all these interactions. Living 80 years, you don't know anything. Living 100 years, you don't know anything. That's why now, going into the 5th dimension, we can live for long periods of time and see all of these things that happen and go on. It's not the way the human mind wants it, in these really quick, instantaneous little short bursts. You're welcome, Needle and Thread. The reign of devotion. In discussing a subject so complex and so obscure as this, with the knowledge of it is so slight as is ours at present, it is perhaps hardly safe to adduce instance, yet since we are told by the 6th or devotional ray has been recently dominant, we may fancy that we can trace the influences of its first subcycle in the stories of the wonderful powers exhibited by early saints, of its second in the Gnostic sect, whose central idea was the necessity of the true wisdom, the gnosis of the third in the astrologers, of the 4th in the strangely distorted efforts to develop willpower by the endurance of painful or loathsome conditions, as did Saint Simon Stillite of the flagellants, of the 5th in the alchemists and the Rosicrucians of the Middle Ages, while its 6th division and purest devotion might be imagined in the ecstasy of the contemplative monastic orders. The 7th cycle would produce the invocation and the exact adherence to external forms of the Roman Catholic Church. The advent of modern spiritualism and devotion to elemental worship, which is so often a characteristic of degraded forms, may regard as premonitions of the influence of the coming 7th ray. So we're going into the 7th ray. We're going into this 4th, 5th higher dimensions of truth. The more so as this movement was originated by the secret society which has existed in the world since the last period of the 7th ray predominance in Atlantis. So you're going way back to Atlantean times when all of this started. That's a long time. How real and decided a dominance is exerted by the ray in the course of its cycle of influence is very evident to those who have read anything of church history. They realize how much to utterly blind devotion there was all through the Middle Ages, how people who were very ignorant about religion nevertheless spoke in its name and tried to force the idea bred of their ignorance on other people who in many cases knew much more. And this is where they tried to dominate all the other cultures, the pagans, everything. Whatever was out there, they tried to destroy it. Even when they came to North America, they tried to wipe out all the natives, all the people in Mexico, uh, all throughout Central America, Brazil, and that. They tried to annihilate it all. But it's still here. There's still people like me and others who carry our ancestral knowledge. They couldn't wipe it out. When they had me in residential school, they tried to destroy my mind. And they did that to lots and lots of natives in Peru, throughout everywhere, even Mexico. Natives were treated really bad for the last 500 years, trying to destroy us. The advent of modern spiritualism, devotion to elemental worship, which is often a characteristic of degraded forms. That's where a lot of people are in witchery, sorcery, and stuff like that. It's degraded. May be regarded as a premonition and the influence of the coming seventh ray. The more so, this movement was originated by the secret society, which has existed in the world since the last period of the seventh ray predominance in Atlantis. How real and decided a dominance is exerted by a ray in the course of its cycle of influence is very evident to those who have read anything in church history. They realize how much utterly blind devotion there was all through the Middle Ages, how people who were very ignorant about religion nevertheless spoke in its name and tried to force the idea bred of their ignorance on other people who in many cases knew much more. Those who wielded the power, the dogmatic Christians, and that's where they are now, they're dogma, they're really, really dogmatic, were precisely the people who knew least about the real meaning of the dogmas they taught. They were those who could have told them a great deal more and could have explained the meaning of many points in the Christian doctrines. That's where natives understood it all, but they tried to destroy that. But the majority would not hear, and they cast out these more learned men as heretics. And that's where they burned people. That's where they destroyed all kinds of beautiful people on this planet. And they call them witches. They were just healers. They understood God and the earth and everything. And they massacred all over the world all kinds of beautiful people. Throughout this dark period, the people who really knew something, such as the alchemists, not that all alchemists knew very much, but certainly some of them knew more than the Christians, were to be found among such secret orders as the Templars, the Rosicrucians, and some of the truth was hidden in Freemasonry. All these people were persecuted by the ignorant Christians in those days. In the name of devotion to God, a great many of the medieval saints were very full of the devotion that was often beautiful and even spiritual, but it was generally so narrow in form, but it usually allowed them, in spite of their spirituality, to hold uncharitable views about others who differed from them, and even to persecute them openly. There were a few who held really spiritual ideas, but they were regarded with superstition and suspicion. Such were the Quietists, the Rubroek, Ruysbroek, Margaret and Christian Ebner, Ebner, Molinus and Jacob Boehme. In almost all cases, the more ignorant people wrote down to those who knew. They always did it in the name of devotion. We must not forget that their devotion was very real and very intense. It was not only in Christianity that the reign of devotion showed itself. It reflected itself powerfully in the religions left behind by the early rays. Hinduism might be thought distinctly cold by devotional people. The religion of Shiva, God the Father, the first person of the Blessed Trinity, spread almost entirely over India, and even to this day, 3/4 of Hindus are worshippers of that aspect of the divine. Before these people is set up the ideal of duty, the Dharma, which is unquestionably a strong point of that religion. They held that men were born in a different caste according to their desert, that wherever a man was born, it was his duty to carry on the dharma of his caste, and to raise out of it he must be so exceptional that for a long time such a thing was almost unknown. They worshipped law and order, and did not approve of discontent as applied to the environment, but taught that the way to God was to use to the utmost the conditions in which man found himself. If he did that, those conditions would improve from birth to birth. Nevertheless, they always said that the door to God was open to man from any caste if he lived rightly, not seeking to better his opportunities by strife, but by doing his dharma to the utmost in the state of life to which God had called him. To the very devotional mind, that would seem cold and scientific, and perhaps it was, but when the devotional ray began to influence the world, there came a great change, and the worship of the second person of the Trinity, Vishnu, incarnating as Sri Krishna, came prominently forwards. Then devotion surged forth without restraint. So extreme it was that it became in many ways a merge orgy of emotion. And it is probably that there is greater devotion at this moment among the followers of Vishnu in India than can be found even among Christians, whose religion is confessedly devotional. The emotion is so great that its demonstration is often uncomfortable for us of the colder races to watch. I have seen hard men of business throw themselves into the ecstasy of devotion, which led them to burst into tears and apparently to break up and change entirely, merely at the mention of the child Sri Krishna. All that has ever been felt for the child Jesus among Western nations is felt for the child Krishna among the Hindus. This was the effect of devotion on religion, which in itself was not devotional in character. Buddhism also can hardly be called a devotional faith. The Buddhist religion was a gift of Hinduism to the great fourth race, and the devotional cycle for that race does not necessarily coincide with ours. That religion does not hold the necessity for prayer. It tells its people, insofar as it recognizes the existence of God, that he knows his own business very much better than they can hope to know it. But it is quite useless for them to pray to him or to try to influence him, for he is already doing better than any man can think. The Buddhist in Burma would say, the boundless light exists, but that is not for us. We shall reach that one day. Meantime, our business is to follow the teachings of our Lord and see to it that we do those things which he would have us do. So does that make sense to all you Buddhist followers? Does it help you really understand it came from Hinduism, a Buddhist belief? It tells you the truth here about Buddhism. Buddhism itself has been touched by this fire of devotion, and in Burma they worship the Lord Buddha almost as God. I noticed this when I had to write the Catechism for Buddhist children. Conlocott wrote the first Catechism of Buddhism, intending it for the use of children, but he made his answer difficult even for grown-up people to understand. We found it necessary to write an introduction to it for children and to reverse his catechism, which was a splendid work for his older students. He asked in that catechism, was Buddha a god? And the answer was no, not God, but a man like ourselves, only far more advanced than we. That was accepted fully in Ceylon and Siam. But when we come to Burma, they object to the negative answer, saying, He is greater than any god to whom we know anything. The Sanskrit word of God is Diva, and the Hindus never use God in our sense of the word unless they are speaking of Ishvara, or else the Trinity, Shiva, Vishnu, and Dharma. Or Brahma. When the missionaries talk about the Hindus as having 33 million or 330 million gods, the word which they translate as God is Diva. That includes a great many beings, angels, nature spirits, and so on. But the Indians moreover worship them than we should. We know that they exist and they catalog them, that is all. In Burma we find that devotion had thus appeared in Buddhism, but in Ceylon, where the people are mostly descendants of Hinduist immigrants, they will tell you, if you ask them why they make offerings to the Lord Buddha, that it is out of gratitude for what he has done for them. When we ask if they thought that he knew of it and was pleased, they said, "Oh no, he has passed far away into Parnarvana. We do not expect him to know anything about it, but to him we owe this knowledge of the law which he has taught us, and for that we perpetuate his name and make our offerings out of gratitude." So this wave of devotion has influenced the world powerfully since the coming of the child Krishna 2,400 years ago. But now the special intensity of this sixth phase has gone and is rapidly giving place to the influence of the incoming ray of the seventh. There is still ignorant devotion among the peasantry of many Aryan countries, but the more educated people are not now readily moved to devotion unless they have at the same time some understanding of its object. There was a phase which had its own value in the fourth subrace, particularly when people were prepared to be devoted to almost anything that would draw out their emotions. And for that, with the stronger development of the lower mind in the fifth subrace, there was a reaction to agnosticism that now it turns has proved unsatisfactory. That wave has practically passed over. Men are now ready, at least, to inquire and examine instead of frantically denying everything. There is a double change now taking place, for in addition to the modification of ray influence, there is also the beginning of the sixth subrace, which brings in intuition and wisdom, blending all that is best in the intelligence of the fifth race and the emotions of the fourth. So the Advent of Ceremonial. So here's a graph. And I'm going to start at the top. It says the logos. Second aspect, first aspect, and third aspect. So it's a triangle. So it's a trinity. And then it goes down: initiation, love of the world, and then Buddha. Buddha and the Institute. It's a little blurry, hard to see. I'm not sure what that word is, but it's Buddha anyways. And then the Bohavista, the Mahakohan, and the seven initiations, and the Mana, and the Mahakohan, and then the Chohans, and the initiation. Then there's little triangles. It says the Master. Can't quite see what that is. And then the Master again. So there's Jesus and all these different beings. There's Serapis, there's Moira. So all of the different masters they've been talking about is right at the bottom with the Chohans. And then below that is Asheka, Asekha, the fifth initiation. So that's what this graph shows here. And then, like I said, the masters are named all across the bottom here. The ray that is now coming in force is very largely one of ceremonial. There was plenty of that in the Middle Ages, but it was chiefly due to the influence of the seventh subrace and the sixth ray, whereas ours is due rather to the first subray of the seventh. So we're already in the seventh, so we're in the first subray. So it will not be regarded principally from that point of view of its devotional effect, but rather from its usefulness in connection with the great diva evolution. It will be most beneficial. The people make it their business to understand. That's why I say you got to have the knowledge as much as may be what is going on. In modern religion, ceremony is year by year playing a more prominent part. In the middle of the last century in England, the churches and the cathedrals had but little life in them. The average country church was then scarcely different from the dissenting chapel. There were no vestments, no painted windows, nor decorations of any kind. Everything was as dull and unornamental as could be. No attention was paid to making anything beautiful and reverent and worthy of God in His service. Thought was given to preaching more than anything else, and even that was done mainly from a practical point of view. If we were to go into the same churches in England today, we should find hardly a parish in that condition. The old carelessness has been replaced by reverence. The churches have in many cases been beautified and decorated, and many of them, and of the cathedrals, the ceremonies are performed with accuracy and reverence. The whole conception of church work has changed. The influence of change of ray is beginning to manifest in other ways as well. There is now rising a special form of Freemasonry called co-masonry, which differs from other forms of the same craft in that the necessity of our time is met by accepting women as well as men. For it is the tendency of our present age that women shall take their place beside men and be equal to them in every respect. That's where women have to be given back the power. They have to be allowed to be where they are. Hey, Frank Preeper. Those who initiated the movement were not thinking about the influence of the ray. Nevertheless, it has been formed and directed by the ceremonial tendencies of the age. I remember that for a long time in the reign of Queen Victoria, there was but little ceremonials to be seen in the streets of London, but it was revered towards the end of her rule, and Edward VII restored it to its original splendor. Many people will now begin to feel the influence of the new ray and will desire to see and perhaps take part in the ceremonies as they have not done before. And that's where lots of people are starting to connect with different things that are making all kinds of magic happen. So here we are, is chapter 8, the Trinity and the Triangles. That's cool. She flies with wings. We know that the logos of the solar system, and that is what most men mean when they speak of God, is a Trinity. He has, or rather is, three persons. He functions through three aspects. They are called by many different names in different religions, but they are not always viewed in the same way. For this mighty scheme of the Trinity has so many aspects that no one religion has ever succeeded in symbolizing the whole truth. In some faiths, they have a Trinity of Father, Mother, Son, which is at least comprehensible to us when we think of the methods of generation and interaction. Of this type, we might find Osiris, Isis, and Horus in the Egyptian teachings. In the Scandinavian mythology, there is Odin, Freya, and Thor. The Assyrians and the Phoenicians believed in the Trinity, the person of which were Anu, E, and Bel. So Ea and Bel. The Druids call them Tulak, Fon, and Moloch. In northern Buddhism, we hear the Amitabha, the Avalokiteshvara, and the Manjushri. In the Kabbalah of the Jew, the three are Kither, Bina, and Choman, Chokman. And in Zoroastrian religion, Ahur Mazda, Asha, and Vuhamano, or sometimes Ahur Mazda, Mithra, and Ariman. And a lot of people think Ariman is a very negative force over in Europe. They hear that name, they just go into fear. And this name has been taken and used in a way that maybe is not a truth. Everywhere the principle of Trinity is acknowledged, though the manifestations are different. In the great Hindu system, there is a trinity of Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. The mother element is not shown in this trinity, but it is indirectly recognized in that each of these three is said to have the Shakti or power, which is sometimes in the symbolized or symbolism name his consort. This is evidently a manifestation of his power in matter, perhaps of somewhat lower manifestation, that of which we must think when we mention the Trinity itself. In Christianity systems, we have the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And it is interesting in this connection to note that in some of the old books of the Holy Ghost is definitely mentioned as being feminine. Apart from this, the instinctive need of man to recognize the divine motherhood has in Christianity found expression in O cult of the Blessed Virgin, who, though not a person of the Holy Trinity, is nevertheless the universal mother, the queen of angels, and the star of the sea. Students should understand that the great department of motherhood exists and has an important place in the inner governments of the world, just as the Manu is the head of the great department which looks after the physical development of races and subraces, just as the Boa Vista is the head of another which attends to religion and education. So is the great official who is called the Jagat Amba, or the World Mother, the head of the Department of Motherhood, just as the Lord Vivasta is a present filling an office of the Manu, the Lord Maitreya that of the World Teacher, so is the great angel who was once the mother of the body of Jesus filling the post of World Mother. It is the work of this department to look especially after the mother of the world. For the occult standpoint, the greatest glory of woman is not to become a leader in society, nor is it to take a high university degree and live in a flat in scornful isolation, but to provide vehicles for the egos that are to come into incarnation. That is regarded not as something to hide and to put into incarnation. And that is regarded not as something, sorry, and read that again, something to hide, but to put away, something to which one should be half ashamed. It is the greatest glory of the feminine incarnation, the grand opportunity which women have and men have not. Men have other opportunities, but that really wonderful privilege of motherhood is not theirs. It is the women who do this great work for the helping of the world, for the continuance of the race. They do it at the cost of suffering of which we who are men can have no idea. But this is so because of the great work done and the terrible suffering which it entails. There is a special department of the government of the world, and the duty of its officials is to look after every woman in the time of her suffering and give her such help and strength as her karma allows. As we have said, the World Mother has at her command vast hosts of angelic beings, and at every birth of every child, one of those is always present as her representative. To every celebration of Holy Eucharist comes an angel of presence, who is in effect a thought form of Christ himself, the form through which he endorses and ratifies the priest's act of consecration. And so it is absolutely true that though the Christ is one and indivisible, he is so. It is absolutely true that though the Christ is one and indivisible, he is nevertheless simultaneously present upon many thousands of altars in something the same way, though, of course, at a far lower level. The World Mother herself is present in and through her representatives at the bedside of every suffering mother. Many women have seen her under such conditions, and many who have not been privileged to see have yet felt the help and the strength which she outpours. And every mother experiences that when they birth children. It is the earnest desire of the World Mother that every woman in her time of trial should have the best possible surroundings, that she should be enfolded in deep and true affection, that she should be filled with the holiest and noblest thoughts. So when you're birthing a child, you shouldn't be cursing and hating men and all kinds of stupid thoughts. You should be thinking the most divine, loving thing for your child to birth into the world. So that none but the highest influences may be brought to bear upon the child who is to be born. So everybody there should be praying and blessing that baby as it comes into the world, so that he may have a really favorable start in life. Nothing but the purest and best magnetism should be awaiting him. It is imperatively necessary that most scrupulous physical cleanliness should be observed in all particulars. Only by the strictest attention to the rules of hygiene can such favorable conditions be obtained as will permit the birth of a noble and healthy body, fit for the habitation of an exalted ego. And like I say, it's the spirit that chooses to come into the world. This matter of providing a suitable incarnation for highly developed egos is one which causes considerable anxiety for the World Mother and to her attendant angels. Many thousands of advanced souls are already for incarnation and anxious to take it in order that they may help in the work of the world teacher. But the difficulty of finding appropriate bodies is very great because lots of young women are alcoholics and drugs. They don't make their bodies sacred temples. And they don't think beautiful thoughts. When their child is born, most women hate their children. In the consequence of foolish and wasteful ostentation, an evil tradition is growing up in the Western world that men and women cannot afford to marry, and that large families are too expensive to be particularly possible, not understanding the wonderful opportunity which their sex gives them. Women desire to be free from the restraints of marriage in order that they may ape the lives and the actions of men. So they try to be more men than women, instead of taking advantage of their particular privileges. Such a line of thought and action is obviously disastrous to the future of the race, for it means that many of the better class parents take no part in the perpetuation, but leave it entirely to the hands of the more undesirable, undeveloped egos. In India, the conditions are different, for everyone marries as a matter of course. But even in the higher caste, there is often a lamentable lack of supervision, and the conditions provided are very unfavorable for the production of sound and healthy bodies. This is a very serious matter, earnestly to be commended to the consideration of all students of occultism, who should assuredly do everything in their power to bring about a more satisfactory state of affairs. It would indeed be well that a woman in all countries should band themselves together in an endeavor to spread abroad among their sisters accurate information on this most important subject. Every woman should be fully realize the magnificent opportunities which the feminine incarnation gives her. Every woman should be taught the absolute necessity for proper conditions before, during, and after her pregnancy. Not only the most perfect cleanliness and the most careful attention should surround the baby's body, but also it should be encompassed by the perfect astral and mental condition. So having angels and all kinds of things around. Very cool, Denny. So the baby's body also it should be encompassed by perfect astral and mental conditions, by love, trust, by happiness and holiness. No booze, no drugs, no stupidity. In this way, the work of the World Mother would be immensely facilitated and the future of the race would be assured. It has often been asked whether there are any adepts living in feminine bodies. The existence of the World Mother is an answer to that question. Because of her wonderful qualities of intense purity and because of her development in other ways, she is chosen to be the mother of the body of the disciple Jesus a long ago in Palestine. But because of the wonderful patience and nobility of the soul with which she bore all the terrible suffering which came to her as a consequence of that position, she attained in the same life the level of adeptship. Having reached that, and finding the seven paths open before her, she chose to enter the glorious diva evolution and was received into it with great honor and distinction. That is the truth which lies behind the Roman Catholic doctrine of her assumption, that she was carried up into heaven among the angels in her physical body, but that when she left that body she took her place among the angels, and being presently appointed to the office of World Mother, she became very true a queen among them, as the Church so poetically says. A great diva needs no physical body, but while she holds her present office, she will always appear to us in feminine form, as will those adepts who have chosen to help her in her work. All through the centuries, thousands upon thousands, both men and of women, have poured heartfelt devotion at her feet. It is very certain that no jot or title of that devotion has been misdirected or wasted, for she who loves her love for mankind has evoked it, has always used its forces to the uttermost in the wondrous task which he has undertaken. However little men have known it, they have poured such a splendid wealth of love at her feet, not because she was once the mother of Jesus, because she is now the mother of all living. We must not think of this knowledge about the World Mother as exclusively the possession of Christianity. She is clearly recognized in India as Jagat Amba, in China as Kuan Yin, the mother of mercy and knowledge. She is essentially the representative, the very type and essence of love, devotion, and purity. The heavenly wisdom, indeed, but most of all, I don't know how to say this correctly, so I'm not even going to try. CONCOLATRIX AFFICTORUM, the counselor, the comforter, helper of all who are in trouble, sorrow, need, sickness, of any other adversity. The Shakti or feminine element in each person of the Blessed Trinity is also recognized in certain quarters in the well-known emblem of the triple Tau, T-A-U, as shown in the diagram. There is also a similar trinity in the case of the higher and the great Logi, and far behind and beyond all that we can know or imagine there is absolute, of which the presentation of all is also a trinity. At the very end of the scale we find trinity in man, his spirit, his intuition, his intellect, which represents the threefold qualities of will, mind, and activity. The trinity in man is an image of that other and greater trinity. Yet it is also much more than an image. It is not only symbolic of the three persons of the Logos, but in some way impossible to understand in the physical consciousness. It is also an actual expression and manifestation of these three persons at the lower level. So here's a symbol of Trinity. And then there's a graph here I'll read when I get to it. So the triangle of agents. As the Logos of Trinity, so the occult government of the world is in three great departments, ruled by three mighty officials who are not merely reflections of three aspects of the Logos, but are in very real way actual manifestations of them. They are the Lord of the world, the Lord Buddha, and the Chohans, who have reached grades of initiation which give them waking consciousness on the planes of nature beyond the fields of evolution of humanity, where dwells the manifestation Logos. And then in brackets says, see a study in the consciousness by Anne Bisset. The Lords of the world is one with the aspects of the highest of our seven planes and wells the divine will on earth. The Buddha is united with the second aspect, which dwells on the Anupadaka plane, Anupadaka, and sends the divine wisdom down to mankind. The Chohan is utterly one of the three aspects, which resides in the nirvanic plane and exercises the divine activity, representing the Holy Ghost. He is verily the arm of the Lord stretched out into the world to do his work. The following table, diagram 8, will make this clear. So this is the diagram here. And the first part says Logos, then divine power, planes of nature, triangle of agents, and then the ray. So the first one is Logos is one aspect, divine power is will, plane of nature is Adi or originating, triangle of agent is the Lord of the world, the ray is one. The second one is aspect, again, is wisdom, the Anupadaka or monadic, the Lord Buddha, ray 2. And then the third aspect is divine powers activity, the plane of nature is Adamic or spiritual. The triangle of agency is a Chohan, and the rays are 3 to 7. The first and second member of the great triangles are different from the third, being engaged in work in the character that does not descend to the physical plane, but only to the level of the Bodhic body in the case of the Lord Buddha, the Adamic plane, in that the great agent of the first aspect, yet without their higher works, none of that at lower levels would be possible, so they provide for transmissions and their influence even to the lowest planes through their representatives, the Manu, the Vivasta, and the Lord Maitreya, respectively. These two great adepts stand parallel to the Chohan on their respective rays, both having taken the initiation that bears that name, and there another triangle is formed to administer the power of the Logos down to the physical plane. We may express two triangles in one diagram. So this is the diagram. For a better period of the root race, the man who works in details of its evolution, the Boa Vistas, the world teachers, ministers, and education, religion, help its members to develop whatever of spiritual is possible for them at that stage, while the Maha Chohan directs the mind of men, so that the different forms of culture and civilization shall unfold according to the cyclical plan. Head and heart are these hands with 5 fingers, all active in the world, molding the race into one organic being, a heavenly man. The last term is no mere simile, but describes a literal fact. For the close of each root race efforts those who have attained adeptship within it, a form mighty organism which is, in very real sense, one, a heavenly man, in whom, as in the earthly man, are 7 great centers, each of which is a mighty adept. The Manu and the Boa Vistas will occupy in this great being the place of the brain and the heart center. In them, and as part of them, glorious ones with them shall we, their servants, be, and the splendid totality will go on in its future evolution to become the ministers of some future solar deity. Yet so transcending all comprehension is the wonder of it all, that this union with others does not mar the freedom of any adept in the heavenly man, nor preclude his acting quite outside its scope. Until recently, it was not the rule of the office of Maha Chohan should be occupied by permanent adept of that grade. It was usually that each of the 5 Chohans in rotation should be appointed to leadership over all 5 rays. Though before occupying the position he was required to take the Maha Chohan initiation. At present, however, we find the Chohan in charge of each of the 5 rays, and also the Maha Chohan separate from all of them, a department from what we understand to be the ordinary method, which may be due principally to the near coming of the world teacher. So I'm going to finish this. It's just about done this chapter. Limit of the rays. So there's a little graph showing the limits of the rays. And it says first ray, second ray, ray 3 to 7. The first ray is initiation line 9, Lord of the world. Initiation 8, the Pratika Buddha, the Buddha. Ray initiation 7 is Manu Baho Vista Maha Chohan, and then below there is initiation 1 and 6. On these 5 rays, 3 to 7, the highest initiation can be taken on our globe is that the Mahokan, but is possible to go further on the first and second ray as indicated in the following table of initiation, in which it will be seen by the Buddha initiation is possible on the second and first ray, and that adept may go still further on the first. Least it should seem as though in the fact that there lay something in the nature of an injustice, it may be made clear that nirvana is attainable as soon as on one ray as another. Any man reaching the Akash level is at once free to enter this condition of bliss for a period that is that to us would seem eternity, but he enters its first stage only, which exalted affinity beyond our comprehension as it is yet far below the higher stages available to the Chohan and the Moha Chohan respectively, while even these in turn pale before the glory of those divisions of the nirvanic states, which thus adepts reach who make the tremendous effort necessary to take during earth life and still higher. Initiation of the first and second ray, further progress is also possible the 5th ray to those who take up other lines of work outside our hierarchy. Change of a ray. The possibility of changing one's ray by the firm determination to do so leaves all paths alike open to the occult student. It is known that both the master with whom the Theosophical Society has been most closely connected have chosen to make this effort, and those of us who wish to retain our affiliation to them as individuals are therefore consciously or unconsciously in course of making it also. The method by which the transfer is effected is simple enough in theory, though often very difficult to carry out in practice. If a student on the sixth or devotional ray wishes to transfer himself to the second ray, that of wisdom, he must first endeavor to bring himself under the influence of the second subdivision of his own. Sixth ray, then, he will try steadily to intensify his influence of that sub-ray in his life until finally it becomes dominant. Thus, instead of being on the second subdivision of the sixth ray, he will find himself on the sixth subdivision of the second ray. In a word, he has tempered his devotion by increasing knowledge till it has become devotion to the divine wisdom. From that he can, if he wishes, by sufficiently strenuous and long continued effort, further transfer himself to some other subdivision of the second ray. Evidently, we have the departure from the ordinary rules of procedure for a monad who came forth through one planetary spirit while returning through another. Such changes are comparatively rare and tend to balance one another satisfactorily. At the end, the transfers are usually to the first and second ray. There are relatively few persons on those two at the lower levels of evolution. Perfect unity is next. The marvelous unity of the member of these triangles of the Logos may be well illustrated by the case of the Boa Vista. We have seen that the union and the pupil with master is closer than any tie imaginable on earth. Closer still because of the higher level was between the master Kuthumi and his teacher, the master Dhruva, Dhruva, who was in his turn a pupil of the Lord Maitreya during the time when the latter took pupils. Thereby the master Kuthumi became also one of the Lord Maitreyas, as at their level unity is still more perfect. Master Kuthumi is one of the Bovistas in a very wonderful way. The adepts seem far above us that we can hardly distinguish any difference in glory between the lower and higher levels. They all look like stars above us, and yet they speak of themselves as dust under the feet of Lord Maitreya. There must be an enormous difference there, even though we cannot see it. We look up to those stupendous heights, and all appears as blinding glory, in which we cannot assume to distinguish one as greater than another, except that we can see by the size of the aura that there are differences, but at least we can also comprehend that the unity of the Master Kuthumi and Lord Maitreya must be far greater and more real union than anything unimaginable at lower levels. Still more is the Boa Vista one of the second persons of the Logos who he represents. He has taken the office of representing him here on earth, and that is meaning the hypostatic union between Christ as God and Christ as man. For he, the Boa Vista, who in the West we call the Lord Christ, is the institutional wisdom, the representative and the expression of the second person of the blessed Trinity. Here is the mystery which underlies the two natures of the Christ, who, although he be God and man, yet he is not two, but one Christ. One, not by conversion of the Godhead into flesh, but by taking of the manhood into God. So that's where he ascended into this higher plane. The second person of the very blessed Trinity exists ages before the Lord Maitreya came into evolution, And the first descent of the second person into incarnation was when, as the second outpouring, he took the vehicle of his manifestation out of the virgin matter of his new solar system, already impregnated and vivified by God, the Holy Spirit. When that had been done, we had, for the first time, Christ unmanifested, as opposed to Christ's manifestation. And even at that time, it must have been true that Christ as God was in one sense greater than Christ as man, as Boavistas, who are to represent the second person on different planets of his system, one by one attain the headship of their ray. They in turn become so thoroughly one with him that they deserve the title of Christ as man. And so at the moment of the consummation of such initiation, the hypostatic union takes place for each of them. The second aspect of the Logos pours himself down into matter, is incarnated and becomes man, and is therefore equal to the Father as touching his Godhead, the inferior to the Father as touching his manhood, as is said in the Athanasian Creed, Athanasian, Athanasian Creed. Our Lord de Boavista has been a man like ourselves, and is such a man still, though a perfect man. Yet that manhood has so been taken into the Godhead that he is in truth a very Christ, a representation of the second aspect of the Trinity. For in him and through him it is possible for us to reach to that divine power. That is why the Christ is spoken of as the meditator between God and man. It is not that he is making a bargain on our behalf or buying us off from some horrible punishment, but as many Orthodox Christians believe, but that he is in truth a mediator, mediator between God and us. One who stands between the Logos and man, whom man can see, and through whom the power of that deity pours forth to mankind. Therefore is he the head of all religions through which these blessings come. So getting towards the end of this book, it goes to 259, and I'm at 229, so I have about 30 pages. Hopefully this did not confuse a lot of you. Don't overthink it. Don't fight with it. Don't try to force it.